How we going, everyone? I hope you're well. Andy here, and we're here this morning for a very important and exciting IG Live. I cannot wait for this one. This one I've been really excited about, and it's a bit of a selfish one because Robert's my favorite author, and I'm here to interview 5 times New York Times best-selling author Robert Greene. It's going to be a very exciting interview, and we're just going to find him and add him now. So, if you have friends, family, people that you want to see this, make sure you get them right now. Call them, get them on. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we're hooking it up as we speak, team. Stay tuned, stay tuned. I love when technology works. Welcome, Robert. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me, Andy. I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a tech moron. I've done about 5 or 6 of these, and I'm kind of Instagram challenged, so I apologize.
Don't worry, so am I. I'm surprised
Yeah.
I pulled it off as well. Thank you
Okay.
so much for joining me, my friend. You well?
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. How about you?
Yes. Yeah,
Wh-
I'm really good.
Are you in Melbourne or Sydney or where?
I'm in Gold Coast at the moment. Yeah.
Gold Coast.
Yeah. So
And
do you know Australia? Have you been to Australia much?
I've been to Sydney and Melbourne for I came for a book festival. I love it. I
Oh, it's
love
amazing.
Sydney. Sydney is amazing, and so is Melbourne. I love Australia.
Yeah,
I'm,
all
I'm a
beautiful cities.
I'm a water person. I've never fallen in love with a city like Sydney.
Ah, there
So
you go.
water everywhere. It's just so
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes, I think you'd love the Gold Coast as well. Very, very
I'm
similar,
sure I
warm.
would. I'm sure I would. Someday I'll go
Yeah.
there.
Beautiful. Well, look, Robert, thank you so much for joining me. Before we kick off, mate, I just want to say a huge thank you, not only for joining me, but just for the work that you do in general. Your work's had a huge impact on me and so many others, and it's not easy to do by any stretch of the word. So I just want to give you some gratitude and share my thanks with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I always love to hear that. So,
Awesome, mate. Awesome.
yeah.
So, look, your books are incredible, and these books aren't books just to be read. They're books to be truly studied and respected, and that's what I love about these books so much. In fact, sometimes when I'm reading your books, I feel like I've uncovered some sort of secret ancient, I don't know, some secret ancient book that's just giving me this wisdom from the past, which it is, but it has that special element to it. You cover and you had this obsession for mastery, history, human nature. Can you just tell us where did this passion come from initially on these topics?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to trace exactly where it came from. It would probably take 3 or 4 hours. We don't have that much
Yeah.
time. But basically, I've always been sort of obsessed with what's really going on with people. I feel like
Mm,
people are mostly wearing masks and
mm,
they're kind of hiding what's really going on inside their heads.
yes.
Maybe it has something to do with my relationship with my parents or something like that. I don't know. But I've always had this feeling that people aren't being completely honest.
Mm,
And so for instance, I worked in Hollywood for several years before I wrote my first book.
mm,
And that has to be the realm where this is the most obvious. Everybody loves you. They love your screenplay. Your acting was fantastic. You're just terrific. But inside they're thinking something else. And then they're playing this game of trying to appear very liberal and open. And instead, they're all really after power. So I'm kind of a realist. I really want to expose what's going on behind the mask, but the mechanisms that really motivate people's behavior, not the
mm,
appearances, not what people say, because people say that they're always motivated by the best things, that they're really kind-hearted, that they have the best interests of other people. And a lot of times they do, but a lot of times they don't. They don't
mm,
admit what's really driving their behavior. And as someone I get very frustrated by that, kind of angry about it. And I
mm,
want people to just be real and authentic and to admit that they're interested in power. It's like people can talk about the dirtiest secrets of their sex life,
mm,
but nobody wants to talk about their interest in power and how they
mm,
might have manipulated or how they might have played this game. It's like our dirty little secret. And I
mm.
like to expose dirty little secrets.
I love that. I love that, and you're doing a terrific job as well. And on
Yeah.
that note, out of the books that you have written, which one was your favorite to write, and why was that? I know it's a bit of a tricky question. You probably love them all, but which was your which one were you most passionate about?
Well, in some ways, the 48 Laws, because it was the first, it kind of launched my career, and it was a moment of such frustration in my life. I was very depressed. I couldn't find my way. And that book kind of delivered me. It was my salvation. It opened this whole world up to me. And I'm
Mm,
talking to Andy Anderson, thanks to this first book. But the most fun book was The Art of Seduction.
mm,
You know, it didn't, like, war was kind of heavy, and mastery, those are kind of heavy books. But
mm,
seduction was just a lot of fun. It's a subject I've always been interested since I was in my 20s. And so that book, the research was very fun for that book. And that was probably the easiest and most fun book to write. But the 48 Laws of Power is probably my sweetheart because it saved me from maybe suicide or
mm.
deep depression. And so it's always like my first love, I suppose.
Yeah, and thank you for being open about that and touching on that. So, guys, if you guys are listening and you have not read these books, you have to go out and get these books immediately and make sure you understand what we're talking about here. But Robert, just I am passionate about the topic you've just brought up, which is managing depression and mental health, and we're in a really strange time right now. And I wanted to talk a little about the time we're in shortly, but now that you brought up depression and mental health, I think it's a good time to sort of have a quick word about that. I mean, in Australia alone, in Melbourne alone, rather, since we had our lockdown period for 6 weeks, we've had over 500 people commit suicide. I think a
Terrible.
thousand people in Australia have committed suicide, and my little brother committed suicide. It's
Oh,
something
I'm
that
so sorry to hear that.
no, that's okay. But I think what comes out of it is, we need to have an awareness around it. And what I love is when I meet people like yourself who are incredibly intelligent, very successful, have a voice, and you've gone through something similar. I'd just like to question you about how did it maybe come about? How did you work through it, and then come out the other side? And how did power help you do that as well?
Well, I've always been kind of, as a teenager, I was sort of a sensitive, I wouldn't say emo, but I was kind of a sensitive lad. And so I have a sort of slight melancholic streak, I'll admit that. But I'm very ambitious,
Mm,
and I won't disguise that. I
mm,
wanted power, I wanted fame, I wanted success.
mm,
And I knew I wanted to be a writer, but
mm,
I couldn't figure out what it was I wanted to write. And I tried everything. I tried journalism. I didn't really like that. I tried writing novels. I was kind of a bohemian wandering around Europe for many years trying to write a great novel. That didn't work, and I just was starving to death. And then I came back to LA and I worked in Hollywood, and that
mm,
wasn't a good fit because I like power, I like control. And in Hollywood, a writer has no power, it has no control.
mm.
And so by that point, I was beginning to doubt myself. I was 35 years old. My parents were beginning to look at me rather strangely, like maybe their son is a loser. What are we going to do for him? I couldn't figure out what it was that I was meant to write or meant to do. And I knew I had the skills and the talent and the drive to do it, but it wasn't coming together. And I was deeply upset and deeply depressed. And just recently, for my new book, I've been going back and reading my journals from those period in the 90s.
Mm,
And it was
mm.
shocking, like how really depressed I was. It was a definite theme on many of the pages in there. And so,
Wow.
but the main lesson that I try and tell people is I never gave up. I never doubted myself. I directed some of my anger and frustration at the world, saying that they don't appreciate me, that it's not my fault, etc. And I kind of beat up on myself at times, but I never really doubted that someday I would figure it out. And I kept
Mm,
writing, I kept trying. I was like a persistent child that was just trying to
mm,
push something open that's maybe a little too hard to push open. I just wouldn't give up. And then by luck, I met a man in Italy in 1995 who was a packager of books, and we were kind of getting along very well. A Dutch man who I love very much, Joost Elferts, and he said, "Robert, do you have any ideas for a book?" And it just kind of spilled out of me like vomit. I just sort of vomited this idea about power and what really is going on in the world. People pretend that they're all PC and saintly, but really they're Cesare Borgias. They're little kings in their court. And this is the reality. And he got so excited. He said, I will pay you to write the treatment for that book. And if it succeeds, I'll pay you a monthly stipend. And I was so desperate, and that this was my moment. I worked like a bitch to get that treatment done. I've never worked so hard. I was never so motivated.
Mm.
And it just turned everything around. The moment I started writing that book, I realized this was what I was meant to do. And so all of those moments where I doubted myself, where I kept trying and trying, were actually leading to this moment. Because if I hadn't spent that frustration, I wouldn't have learned skills like from journalism about how to write under a deadline and how to write with discipline. And Hollywood taught me how to write in a dramatic fashion, how to make things entertaining and interesting.
Mm.
All of these things that seemed dead ends ended up kind of enriching my soil and helping me in the long run. So in some ways, you have to kind of trust that there's a process, and you have to have kind of a faith in yourself, although sometimes it can be very hard to have that faith.
But I love that. I love that story. I guess just two epic takeaways from that for me is that constant faith in your vision or your dream, whatever that may be, and cultivating that. And then, as you mentioned, anything that happens in life, it can be seen as a failure or a something that's irrelevant, but you were smart enough to see the gifts in every adversity or the gifts in every potential failure, because all of those things are adding something to your life, a lesson, a gift that now, made you the man that you are. So,
Yeah. Well, also, because I couldn't quite figure out what I was meant to do, I was trying all different kinds of jobs to support myself. I worked in construction site in Greece. I worked at a detective agency in Los Angeles. I worked on the first online. I tried everything. And because of that, which in the time made it look like I was a lost soul, in retrospect, I saw so many realms of power, so many power games in so many different areas that it really helped me write the 48 Laws of Power. So if I hadn't had that experience, I don't think I could have written that book.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so, in sort of your latest book, you talk a little bit about envy in social media and I guess how that currently plays out. And I was going to get to this a little bit later on, but now speaking about sort of mental health and depression, I thought it'd be relevant. Do you think that social media and the way that we're constantly comparing and viewing these, fake lives at the moment is having a mass scale impact on anxiety and depression? What are your thoughts?
I'm sorry, I have a 9-week-old kitten here on my back scratching me. I'm sorry if I got, um, anyway, I'll show them to you a little later on. Um, yeah, it's very odd. It's a very paradox because we're so sophisticated. We live in this modern world
Mm.
that we take for granted. Here you and I are talking on this medium that's almost like something from Dick Tracy's, like so
Yeah.
futuristic. It's hard to believe that I'm sitting here
Yes.
talking on this, right? So we're so
Yes.
sophisticated, we're so technological, but at the same time, we're so goddamn primitive. And the
Mm.
most primitive part of our brain comes from hundreds of thousands of years ago when we were first becoming social animals. And as
Mm.
social animals, even like chimpanzees, our brains operate by comparing ourselves to other people.
Mm.
And so they've demonstrated among chimpanzees that they are prone to feeling envy. It's something built into social animals and primates. And our
Mm.
earliest ancestors, envy was a terrible, terrible problem. People were being murdered because they received
Mm.
more food or more gifts than other people in the tribe. And so they evolved all these elaborate rituals to make sure that as soon as you got a gift, you gave it to everybody else. So
Mm.
here we are in this world where humans are very naturally prone to comparing themselves and feeling envy. And in
Mm.
the past, you could feel envy about your small circle of friends, in your family or people you knew. They got a job that you didn't get, but it was limited to maybe like 20 or 30 people that you could feel envious of. Now that envy world is open up to billions of people because on
Mm.
social media, we're now opening doors to the lives of everybody around the world. And we're hearing about their fabulous adventures, their trips to Bali, the wonderful people they're falling in love with, their incredible romantic partner, the great career opportunities they're having. And of course, ow, stop that. And of course, it's got to, and, and of course, they're lying, or they're kind of massaging the truth. They're leaving out all of the moments of depression and doubt and the bad relationships and the trips that weren't that great, and will you stop it? And they're kind of giving us this kind of expurgated version of their lives. But we
Yeah.
don't see that. We just see all of the great stuff. And we get envious, and you can't help it. So it's a tremendous magnet for that kind of comparing, envious energy that we all feel. And I say in my book, I'm trying to take the guilt out of being a human being in my book. Yeah. This is the monster that's plaguing me right now. Go away. Um,
Scary.
yeah. There's the old Monty Python routine of the kitten that's terrified London. That's kind
Yeah.
of what he's like. Anyway, so I want to take the guilt out of being human, and so, like, other people are narcissists, other people are aggressive, but hey, stop it. Sorry, you just knocked down. I'm gonna have
He
to
wants that
monitor this.
power. He's
He
trying to
does.
control this whole thing.
Um, anyway, I have to keep him away. So anyway, stay away, down, go away. Um, so, you know, we feel guilty. Like, envy is never an emotion that people want to admit to. People will admit to feeling, greed or whatever, but envy is a very ugly thing because it means you feel inferior to someone else.
Mm.
But I'm trying to say we all are prone to feeling this. And most of the time, we don't act on it. We may say a passive aggressive or a bitchy comment to someone who suddenly tells us of the great success they've had. We might say something a little biting or sarcastic. That's human, and I want you to just sort of accept it and let it ride by. But there are people out there who are toxic envier types who are going to actually take action to sabotage you or hurt you. And oftentimes it'll be your friends. So I want to show you that you can't be naive, that especially in this environment that's so incredibly full of people, it's like a petri dish of envy, that you need to be a little bit aware, and aware that there are some people out there that can really hurt you in the end and try and sabotage you.
So true. And I think that's, the beauty of what you write about in your books. I had this conversation the other day. It's that, stepping into your own greatness, you have to have awareness around the good side and the bad side, or the dark side of human nature in general. You can't just be naive and think it's all rainbows and lollipops. If you
No.
understand both realms, you can then, of course, defend yourself when you need to and step into your
Right.
greatness when you need to and become that better version of you. And that's what I think
Right.
is so powerful about what you write about. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And the thing is, when you have success in life, and that's sort of what we all want in some way, it doesn't have to be money, it just can be recognition. That's when you're going to feel envy the most. It's going to come out of the woodwork, and it can be very painful because really, what you want is you want your friends to admire you and recognize you and give you the love. Look how hard I worked. And instead, they kind of say things that rub you the wrong way or that get under your skin. And I want you to be aware of that. And I want you to find a way to maybe even forgive them for feeling that way, unless it turns toxic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very, very important lesson. Very important lesson. So on that note, you speak a little bit about the dark side, or the shadow side of human nature. And I love this as well, because again, you're right. People often don't want to talk about this side of people. It's like we would pretend that this doesn't exist, or
Yeah,
as you just said, taking the guilt away from being human, because it doesn't matter if you are the Pope or you or me or anyone. We all have a shadow side and, of course, a light side. And it's more about embracing it, understanding it, and using it resourcefully, not unresourcefully. Could you just share a little bit about, what the shadow side is, and how you're seeing it sort of play out in this strange time that we're going through in 2020?
well, social media is a magnet for envy, and it's also a magnet for our shadow, our dark side, because, and I'll explain a little bit what that is in a minute, but
Mm.
you know You're anonymous. Nobody can see you. And
Mm.
you can do whatever, you can say whatever. You have license to be as mean-spirited and ugly and hateful as you want to be. And you're
Mm.
not going to pay a price. And so people will never admit that that's what's going on, that they're kind of venting their own hostility, their own shadow side. They feel like they're just being natural and human. But actually, that if some of the things that people write on social media, if they were to do it to my face, they would get their face punched in, right? They
That's
would pay
right.
a they would pay a fucking price for that kind of audacity. But on the
Yeah.
internet, you can get away with anything. So
Mm.
here, I could just throw out all of my dark feelings and emotions that have been repressed, and it's kind of can get kind of ugly. Now,
Mm.
where does the shadow come from? I think people who have had children understand this very well. Children are not these sweet little angels that we might think about. They have an angelic side for sure. They can be sweet and nice, but they also have another side. They can be aggressive. They can pull their sister's hair. They can, like my sister did, she could put something in my soup to kind of give me diarrhea when she was upset with me. You know, children can be like that. They're kind of, I call them, they're like a round ball. The human nature is like this round ball. It's complete. It includes loving feelings and it includes sort of hostile, aggressive feelings.
Mm.
And it's natural and it's human. And um, and then what happens is we get older, 5 or 6 or 7 years old. We're sort of told, "Come on, you got to be a better person. Calm down. Don't act out so much." The teacher's telling us, the parents are telling us,
Mm.
"You want to be liked. You want to be loved. Don't be like that. Be kind of sweeter, etc." And slowly, that's part of our nature that could be rebellious, that could be aggressive, that could be slightly hostile. We push it down and down and down. We repress it, and that round ball becomes half of a ball, becomes sliced in half, and we have the front side of the moon, and then we have the dark side of the moon that we never
Mm.
show people, and we become divided from our true nature. But it never goes away. The human psyche is such that you can never get rid of anything. What you
Mm.
experienced when you were 3 years old, you're not conscious of, but it's still there and it's still affecting your behavior. So that part of you that was complete and round doesn't go away. It's there. It's
Mm.
dying to get out. It's dying to come out. And you'll notice when people are 20s and 30s, it'll come out in weird ways, in weird behavior. They'll suddenly
Mm.
do something. We notice this a lot with celebrities, where they do something very embarrassing or weird. They say something, hateful, or they have an affair or whatever. And then they go, "Oh, that wasn't me. That's not who I am. Something came over me." And I'm trying to say, no, that is who you are. That's
Mm.
exactly who you are. That's your dark side that's coming out, that's speaking out. And
Mm.
so what I'm trying to say in my book is come to terms with this part of yourself. Don't
Yes.
try and repress it. Don't try and hide it. Admit it's there. Even Gandhi had a dark side, and I can even
Mm.
discuss that at some point, right?
Mm.
Everybody has it, right? Nobody is a saint. We all have this. So what you need to do is you need to see it in yourself, see the signs of it, accept it, accept that child, that round ball, and
Mm.
then try to find ways to channel that energy into something productive.
Mm.
And athletes are kind of, to me, the classic example of that. Like someone like a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant. I
Mm.
happen to be a basketball fan. I know you have a lot of people who love basketball in Australia, so you know who those people are.
Mm.
These are people who are incredibly competitive, incredibly aggressive,
Mm.
right? And yet they manage to channel it into something very productive.
Mm.
Michael Jordan could be a bit of a dick sometimes, but in general, it was all towards winning and for the team, etc. So you want to channel it into your ambition, into creating something great, into writing a great book or building a great business. You want to
Mm.
channel it into some kind of social cause that you believe in. Instead of hurting people, try and help people by working towards some cause for the greater good of humanity, etc.
Mm.
There are ways to channel that energy into something productive. If you're an artist, if you're a writer, a filmmaker, I always tell people that dark side is your creative gold mine. You need to
Yes.
mine that
Mm.
because we're so repressed in this 21st century. We're
Mm.
so
Mm.
mired in political correctness that when we see a film or read a book that kind of touches upon these naughty subjects, we're
Mm.
drawn to it. It's an incredible release for us. And that's half the reason 48 Laws of Power is so
Mm.
successful, is the taboo element. So don't be afraid of your dark side. Put it into your work in some productive way.
Yeah, I love that. And it is so true. You gave some great examples there. Jordan is such a great example. Kobe Bryant, such a great example. Just, again, channeling that aggression into that energy. Because you're right. I mean, I think anger, it's such a strong, energetic force when channeled, of course, in the right way or the wrong way. But when we're trying to succeed in life, if you want
Yeah.
to be more competitive, more sharp, push past barriers that most people cannot push past, it comes from the dark side, doesn't it? Like that's the plain and simple. So I think again, not many people speak about this, and it's refreshing and also incredibly powerful that you're one of the first to really get it out there and start sharing with people to leverage.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that I'm somebody that has a bit of anger inside. I've always had it
Mm,
since I was a teenager.
mm,
And Hollywood, my experiences there really kind of embittered me in a way, not because I wasn't successful, but because I hated the hypocrisy that
mm,
I saw.
mm,
And that anger fueled the 48 Laws of Power. And in
mm.
fact, in the acknowledgments of the book, I thanked all of the people who had manipulated and tortured me in my work world because they gave me all the material for this book. So
Yes.
that is a classic example of a
Mm.
productive way to channel your anger and your frustration.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. I love that, Robert. So, Robert, you've just launched a bit of a YouTube channel, which is great. I've been watching some of those videos on there. And again, as per usual, you're really hitting the mark with some current topics, of course. And one very, very current topic, which we're all being impacted by, is the coronavirus globally.
Yeah,
Um, Melbourne, you've been to Melbourne. We've just been put into another full
I
lockdown
know
there,
it's
which is
terrible.
crazy. Yeah, and it looks like it's sort of creeping back up this way. But you speak about something very interesting, and I was fascinated by it. And you were talking about these generational patterns that we seem to go through. And you mentioned things like the consolidating generation and the more rigid systems generation, the crisis generation, and then the revolution generation. And what I loved about some of the things that you were saying was that, we in these times and in any time, we think that we're the first to experience it. It's not happening to anyone else. This is the first time. We're so special, and that unfortunately intensifies the uncertainty, the scarcity mindset, the fear. And what I love about what you're explaining is that these cycles have happened, hundreds of years, and we're going through something very similar. Would you be able to just explain a little bit more about these patterns that you've recognized and you've studied, and maybe where we are now and how can we maneuver through these?
Well, I was definitely in Laws of Human Nature. I was inspired by a book called Generations, which I acknowledged in that YouTube video. That
Mm,
was very instructive. A great book I recommended for everybody, written by two guys named Strauss and Howe.
right.
And they sort of explained the pattern, but it's also something other people have written about, particularly Machiavelli, who's sort of my
Mm,
patron saint. And
yeah.
basically, if you read a lot of history like I do,
Mm,
you notice that there are patterns,
mm,
continual patterns that occur. You know, empires that rise like Rome, and empires
mm,
that fall, empires like the United Kingdom that rise and then fall
mm,
over and over and over again. The same patterns, the same kind of causes that are there. And so it gives you this sense of normally we think of history as this great kind of progression up,
mm,
up, up, up to the heavens where we're just getting better and better. But when you read a lot of history, you don't see that going like that. You see it going whoop, 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 like that, right? Because it's human nature,
mm,
and human nature is such that we're split. On the one hand, we love things that are new, we love change, we love to travel to new places, but we're also conservative. We're also fearful. We're afraid of death. We don't like too much change. We don't like too many things that are new. But then if we go too hard in one direction, if we get too much change and too much novelty,
yeah.
it kind of sickens us and we react. But if we get
Mm,
too rigid, we also feel like we're not alive. And we see the same thing in cultures, right?
mm,
So there'll be one generation, and you can look at the French Revolution, you could look at the 1920s in the United States or around the world, where people, particularly young people, because they're the ones that kind of generate these changes, decide they're so sick of the world, they're so sick of what their parents have created, it doesn't have any relevance to the world that they live in. They don't like the social codes, the conventions, the politics. They rebel, they create a revolution, they create totally new tastes in fashion, in arts, in politics. They just turn everything upside down. And it's very exciting and very refreshing and very creative. And then the next generation comes along and they're kind of living off of the people who created this revolution. And they like it, they're the children of it, but they're not so attuned to what caused the original revolution, which was this kind of stagnant situation. And so their idea is to try and consolidate what happened to make things a little more orderly, right? And calm things down a little bit, because that's human nature. And then the next generation comes up where they find this kind of consolidation, and they make things even more rigid and even more tight and even more orderly and more conventional, because as I said, that's human nature. We want kind of things to be orderly, we want control. And then that gets so oppressive and so bogged down. The classic period in the United States was the 1950s, but we've also been through it in other periods as well, that it leads to the crisis generation, which I believe is what the millennials are basically, what I would call the millennials, where the old order doesn't have any sense to them anymore. Things aren't relevant. The politics is so distant, right? The culture doesn't speak to them anymore. It's the world of the boomers. They're controlling, they're dominating everything. And they feel crowded out of the stage, and they're kind of angry and they're restless. And they're sowing the seeds for the next generation, which is the revolutionary generation, which I believe is what is in the making right now, Generation Z or whatever you want to call it. We're seeing that on the streets in the United States and around the world. And it's not just from the killing of George Floyd, which is a terrible, terrible thing here, but it's been boiling up for a long time. There's been a lot of frustration. The millennials came into a world that was defined by 9/11. And then there was the crash of 2008, which cratered their whole career possibilities. And they were kind of bitter about that and Wall Street. And then comes along the coronavirus, just totally ripping the rug out from under them. And here they're looking at the world of the boomers who've got all of this kind of cushy life. And they're angry and they're pissed off, and it's normal. And now they're setting the seeds for a generation that is really alienated and angry and wants something different. And I want to remove this from the political realm for a moment, because a lot of people, particularly in the comments on my video, were like, "Oh, not all revolutions are great. Look at communist China, etc." Blah 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 blah. I'm trying to get you to look from a bird's eye point of view about history. These things are inevitable and they're healthy. They might lead to something oppressive in the end, but we need change. If human societies don't change, if there aren't these revolutions, these cycles of churning up the soil, we just wither and die, right? Our culture dies. We need these revolutions. We need, even if they're painful, even if they cause hurt for some people, they're extremely necessary. Just as sometimes it's necessary for you to break up a relationship in order to feel more alive. You need to break up with the past. The ghosts of the past are weighing you down. You need to get rid of all these goddamn ghosts and start living in the present. And I think young people now, I'm very excited about that, because they're waking up and they're wanting to create a world that fits more of their reality, which is not the world that they've had to grow up in. So I'm very excited about this moment, and I think that's what we're living through right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I just love that for everybody out there understanding that you can sort of predict what's going to happen a little bit, in regards to the patterns and the cycles that take place. And not everything has to be viewed from a negative, pessimistic standpoint. As you did mention in your second video, which is more about, the opportunity in crisis. And you gave some awesome strategies in there, how to manage lockdown and COVID. But let's move on to the opportunity in crisis and the opportunity we have right now in society. Going through this pattern, you just mentioned that we are on the cusp of the revolutionary generation. What sort of opportunities do you see that we have?
Sorry. That was me, not the cat.
That cat wants a revolution.
No,
my
it was me.
He's rebelling.
It was me.
That's you.
I'm sorry. So say the last question you said.
So my question was, we are on the cusp of a revolutionary generation,
Right.
and what are the opportunities in crisis that you sort of see, and you think that our viewers and people listening can leverage and move into? What can we be optimistic about?
Well, it's hard to see right now what we can be optimistic about, but basically, capitalism goes through these periods of creative destruction,
Mm.
and it's another pattern that we notice where sorry, I'm being menaced by my kitten again. I have to keep him away. Um, so no, no, stay away. Um, so and these periods are healthy
Mm.
because a lot of companies, a lot of businesses are no longer relevant. They're no longer
Mm.
viable anymore. And so there's new kinds of new technologies, new things. So
Mm.
whole fields are being destroyed and space is created for something new. And that can
Mm.
be healthy. So I'm trying to point you to in that chapter. I'm sorry, you have to get down. Stop it. Stop it. Kitten management here. 48 laws of power. You have to be very sensitive to the zeitgeist. That was what the point of the chapter was. And you have to realize, what is my business if I'm an entrepreneur? What
Mm.
is it about the world? Where are we going in 5 years? You need to think in those terms. And
Mm.
that's even more critical now, where things are just completely turned upside down and we have no idea what the world is going to really be like, whether my job's still going to be there in a year or two. So you need to think forward. You need to think, maybe the career that I'm in is not really where the world is headed in the next few years.
Mm.
And this
Mm.
could be an opportunity to rethink my life's path. Sorry, I had to do the kitten again. Um, so it's an opportunity to rethink your life in some
Mm.
ways, and that can be painful. But, I try and make the point in mastery, for instance, that you have to choose a career path that connects to you emotionally, that excites you, that you love. And I know it's kind of a cliche to kind of go for your passion. It can kind of be a lot of bullshit in that. But if you don't find something that really connects to you in a deep, primal way, you're never really going to be successful in a way that lasts, in a way that fulfills you. And so we tend to grab for jobs that kind of, keep us alive from moment to moment. And this is a
Mm.
time where you want to maybe rethink that pattern and rethink how perhaps you could take your life in a different direction, you know?
Mm.
Um, and then the other thing is, we live in a world where we're so inundated with information, where we're so inundated with social media, and our brains are just filled to the brim with data, etc., that you have no room to think about yourself. You have no room to think about who you are, what you love, what matters to you, and you're kind of trapped in this kind of social media, social cycle where you lose touch with who you are. And I try to make the point in mastery that your weirdness, your uniqueness is your source of power. What
Mm.
makes you different is your source of power. People who are really successful in this world, who in arts, sports, wherever, they're one of a kind. There's nobody else out there like them. They bring
Mm.
they're not afraid of being unique. As Jimi Hendrix says, they wave their freak flag high. They're not afraid of that. And that is your source of power. But when you're
Mm.
so inundated with media, etc., and Instagram and Facebook, you have no room to think about yourself. Well, now you're alone, you're in your apartment, you're quarantining, you're kind of freaking out because you don't have your usual outlets. And this is the time to think about yourself, to think about your strengths and think about your weaknesses and what you can work on, and time to read some books, and time to
Mm.
enrich your mind, and time to not always look for distractions. Instead
Mm.
of playing video games to kind of distract and dull your pain, this is a time to build real inner strength. You know, you're into exercise, and so am I. I exercise every single day. But you also have to exercise your brain. Your brain needs exercise as well, right? And you can develop really bad mental habits. And here's a time to develop really solid mental habits where you can be alone and you can be strong and you're not afraid and you're looking hopefully at the future and you're creating a career path for yourself and you're developing some discipline, etc., where you're not immediately grasping or binge watching TV or porn or whatever, internet porn. You're actually learning some to delay instant gratification. These are important life skills. And also, the 18th chapter of the laws of human nature. This is a time to overcome your fear of death and fear of your mortality and confront it. Because tomorrow you might catch the coronavirus. This might be the last 2 weeks of your life here on planet Earth. And that's not a joke. That can happen. I nearly died 2 years ago. My stomach came this close to dying. It can happen any day. I wasn't expecting it. It came out of the blue.
Yes.
That awareness can be incredibly liberating because it means you have to make the most of each day that you have.
So true. And as you said, it can be a very scary time for some people, but it's also very, very exciting. And I think one of the things people need to be prepared for is, as you just mentioned, rethink potentially, or I guess maneuver their careers or their business models. I run a health and fitness chain here in Australia, and we're maneuvering and changing some things, and some things you've got to let go of and other things you've got to lock down and pivot a little bit more, but you've just got to be malleable, don't you? You've got to be dynamic in this time.
Right. You have to be fluid, and you have to, and your words are exactly right, you have to let go. Sometimes you have to let go and not be afraid of change. And there are probably things that you were kind of skidding along with, just getting by because they were kind of easy, and now they're not so easy. You have to just let it go and figure out new paradigms. Hey, stop that. So, one trend that I see and that other people have talked about is that we're so inundated with social media that what people are missing most in life are our experiences, right? Right. And so a lot of businesses are now centering around giving people a kind of an experience that they can't get on social media. So you go to a spa or a health facility or something, and you're creating an environment where people aren't just working out, but something else is going on. And in the next 5 or 10 years, people are craving new experiences, not just virtual experiences, but real things. That's where a lot of businesses are going to be evolving, more than just service economy. This is going to be a real need that you've got to think. These are things you got to think about. And that was what my chapter is about. Thinking a little bit ahead of the trends. It's like we're on a wave. The present is a wave, and it goes up and down and up and down. And you're kind of either behind the wave, trying to catch up if you surf, or you're on the wave and you're kind of riding it, or you're a little bit ahead of the wave and you're seeing where things are going to be. Being a little bit ahead of the wave is the optimum position. Yes. Because that means you're really going to catch it when it crests.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, at this point in time, it's so crucial that you do have to be ahead of the wave, but also being ahead of the wave, people don't see what you see often, and they don't understand.
Yes,
they don't understand the vision. So you have to also be strong enough to face the critics, the naysayers, push through barriers, because that's part of vision, seeing what other people just cannot see, and that's the most important thing in a time like this.
Yeah, I mean, he can be a bit of a jerk, but Elon Musk is sort of like that,
Incredible.
He has a vision of something that, and everybody criticizes him at the time when he's like first thinking of the Tesla car. And I remember very clearly talking to a lot of business people there. The guy's absolutely insane. To develop a car business from scratch is impossible because it requires so much capital and so much investment and so much labor and so much machinery that he can't build it from the ground up anymore.
Yeah.
And he heard this and he didn't care, and he just went ahead and did it. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy that he believed in it so much that people bought his stock, and that gave him the amount of capital that he needed in order to finance the incredible factory that he built up here in California. So he's an example of all the things that we're talking about. He sees a little bit ahead, and he's not afraid. He's not afraid to take chances. He doesn't listen to criticism. And he definitely is someone who channels that dark side. Because if you know about his childhood and his parents and everything, he's somebody with a very strong dark side.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. Mate, we don't have much time, but I've got just a couple more questions. This is a selfish question I just want to pick your brain about. You just talked about mental habits, and I've just restructured my morning rituals a little bit to focus more on writing and vision and study, because I just feel like right now in my life, I need to double down on my study again. And I'm curious as to you, how many hours a day do you spend reading and studying for your books and I guess what you do in life?
Well, I spend way too much time. It's kind of frustrating, but I'm preparing for my next book right now, and I
Mm.
read several hundred, 200 to 300 books to write a book. So I try and read a book in every like 3 or 4 days. If it's a really good book, it takes me longer. If it's a really sucky book, I can read it in a day. But I have to read a lot because
Mm.
research is what makes the books come to life. Um,
Yes.
so it's a balance because it can get a little bit depressing when you're just here in your room reading and taking notes. So
Mm.
I have to find other ways to kind of give my life some spice. I
Yes.
exercise every day. I have a special bicycle that I can ride. It's called a recumbent bike, a trike,
Mm.
because my stroke, I can't really balance myself, and it allows me to go up in the hills and get into nature. And then
Awesome.
I work out with weights every other day, which after this talk, I'm going to go and do my strength training. And,
Mm.
and I have ways to distract myself. It used to be that watching Laker games, because I'm a diehard Laker fan, was a
Mm.
major form of relief from some of this tension. But there's no basketball games, and that's
Mm.
really
Exactly.
frustrating.
Yeah.
So I've had to be a little bit more creative. But, the books can be very tedious to do the detailed work, and I'm dealing with that right now.
Mm.
But I've been through it so many times that I know in a couple months when I start writing, the glory will start coming, and I've got all these amazing ideas, all these incredible stories. It's going to come together so I can live through the next couple months that are going to be so incredibly tedious. You have no
Mm.
idea how tedious they are.
Mm.
So I've been
Mm.
through this many times and I've learned.
Yeah, I love that. And so I published my first book last year, and I'm not a natural writer, and it was very, very, very challenging for me. And in those moments where I was struggling intensely, I kept just using you as a bit of a model, and I'd say, what would Rob do right now? What would Robert
Oh,
Greene
really?
do right now? And it just
Uh,
pushed me a little bit more. It pushed me a little bit more
uh,
because I love
uh,
to talk. I love to
uh,
be moving around. So getting
yeah.
me still for that long, it was
Uh,
torture sometimes. But I
it is
had that.
torture.
Yeah, it is, and I had you as that inspiration, so I
But
thank you for that.
but
Mm.
having written a book, isn't it an incredibly satisfying feeling? Aren't you so glad you did it? Don't
Absolutely,
you
it's one of
don't
one
you
of my
feel
greatest
like
achievements.
yeah, like you overcame something in yourself. You overcame an obstacle that you
Mm,
have,
mm,
being alone, being disciplined, sitting
mm,
there by yourself and not giving into distractions. And there it is for 1,000 years your book will live or however long.
mm,
So yeah,
mm.
it's a great feeling. So congratulations.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. And I got one more question for you. This one I love to end on, and it's always an interesting ask. If we could jump into a time machine, that cat, cheeky bugger. If we could jump into a time machine, take you back to your childhood, and you could give yourself just some sound advice to help you thrive more growing up in your lifetime, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, there's a philosophy that I talk about in my books, and then my mentor, my disciple Ryan Holiday, has taken up,
Mm,
called Amor Fati, which basically means love of fate. And the
mm,
idea is that it's a Stoic idea. It means that you love everything that happens to you. Don't worry about that. That'll go away. Even the bad things that happen to you.
mm,
There's a sorry, I
mm.
should have taken that off. All right, that'll go away. Don't worry. Um, all these distractions, my kitten, the phone. Oh, God damn. So it basically means if you're able to look at everything in life as kind of
Mm,
having a purpose,
mm.
even your failures, even your dark moments, it's the most powerful position to be in because that means nothing can hurt you, nothing can really
Yes.
bother you in the end. And
Mm,
so I would tell that 18-year-old Robert, and it's funny because I'm reading my journals from back then, who was kind of depressed, that it's
mm,
okay. Everything happens for a purpose. Things will work out in the end. Just keep doing what you're doing. And what I
mm,
noticed from the earlier version was I just loved writing. Was writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. A lot of it was absolute crap. I'd be so embarrassed if anybody read it right now. But I was just, I was determined and I
Mm.
wouldn't give up. And so I wouldn't give myself any advice, because young people don't like to listen to advice. You think you know everything. I
Yes.
just would have said, it's all going to turn out for the better. So don't worry about it.
Mm.
You know, that's kind of where I would go.
I love that. I love that. Robert Greene, thank you so much for joining me. Again, I just want to share my gratitude, and I can't wait for your new book. Every book I love and I respect, and you're a 5 times New York Times best-selling author. We're going to be hitting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I cannot wait for them all.
Okay.
So, my friend, thank you. Keep shining and keep spreading your message. It's important.
Thank you very much, Andy. I'm gonna I'm gonna look for a copy of your book.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Have
Thank
a
you so
great day.
much. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.